Greetings, my fellow intellectuals and bookworms. It's time for another book review. This is a double second one for you today. Some of the new stuff. Today we're going to be reviewing this book, The Conquerors. Again, another one of the Indiana books. If you want, you can listen to the video before that for an explanation. But it's not essential to continuity. Anywho, I already know what you're going to say. You're going to be like, but Sean, there's so many history books on the history of World War II. There's so many books on the war in Europe, blah, blah, blah. How do I know this isn't going to be the same? I know you're probably rushing to comment that. And I am aware of that. To a certain extent, yes, it's true, but it's also true that World War II was basically the biggest war in the history of humankind. The only one that comes close in casualties is this Chinese war from the 15th century, and that's because China had so many fucking people at the time. And yes, to a certain extent, there are a lot of histories of World War II. That's because, again, it accompanied multiple theaters. There were a lot of different things that could be said about it, key turning points, different focuses. And to a certain extent, the problem is cultural. In the U.S., at least, American Heroes Channel airs a lot on Veterans Day and Memorial Day about WW2 documentaries. A lot of these World War II documentaries are quite ironically the same ones. For example, it's called Battles of World War II, and then it's Battles of World War II followed by Great Battles of World War II. Joke's on you, they're both the exact same show. It's just one is a year newer. So they're repackaging stuff. The only reason why I know this is because I've watched so many World War II documentaries and love World War II history so much that I've watched almost every single show there are on U.S. cable TV networks. Anywho, this one, essentially what's different about this one is it focuses on Roosevelt and Truman and how they made decisions, how they pursued policy on a scale with a plan to not only end Germany, but to decide the future in Europe. How FDR said to Churchill, listen, we'll help you, but the British Empire must go by the end of the war. And Churchill, according to this book, immediately started crying and yelled, you can't have the British Empire, I won't let you. And during a desperate time, Churchill begged for old destroyers through Lend-Lease, and Roosevelt said, all right, but we want the right to use all British ports in North America, which basically meant that at a single signature of a pen, Halifax, Bermuda, the Bahamas, and several others were turned over to U.S. use for the duration of the war. So it shows how the grand game was played, because at least anyone who's aware knows that the Potsdam Conference and the others were a grand chess game between several masters who all intent on getting the most they possibly could and all intent on winning. And even people who are vaguely aware of that, like if you're a D student, this takes a better look at the psychology and how the chess game was played, moves made, how each side thought the other would react, how it created tension that would eventually lead to the Cold War, how, to a certain extent, the U.S. Held all the cards and set policy for the post-war era, and it focuses on some slightly ignored chapters, such as the bombing of Auschwitz. It was tabled, honestly, not because it couldn't have been done. It was tabled because, well, bombing was anything but precise, and we feared about hitting civilian casualties. Also, if you look at adversity, we were concerned that if Hitler thought the Allies were going to do this, that he would kill Jews more, and he did. If you look at 1944 to 45, more Jews were killed in the entirety of 44 and the half of 45 than much of the previous year's totals combined. So we were concerned about that, and to a certain extent, we couldn't have known that it would have had any effect. I mean, Hitler was so I don't know, hell-bent and obsessed with killing the Jews that even when the rail lines were being constantly bombed and the war was being lost, he pressured the Romanians, one of his allies, to send the entire Jewish population of, I forget what the fucking capital of Romania is, I know it, but not in this sleep-deprived state, to Hitler to be killed in Germany proper because the war was going that bad at the point. He deliberately forced, when camps were being closed and evacuated, people to walk just to kill the Jews. He, as I said, less than 2 months before the end of the war, he forced the Hungarians to hand over the entirety of Budapest Jews. So it's not like bombing Auschwitz would have helped. And to a certain extent, civilian casualties is what we were concerned about. Now, granted, according to some people in the camp, they would have rather been hit by American bombs than anything. But I have to agree with the assessment by this historian who looks at the evidence and says that at best, bombing Auschwitz would have been a moral victory over anything else. It also looks at things such as I said, that forgotten chapter in which basically FDR savagely told Churchill that colonialism and empire must end by the end of the war in return for U.S. help. Cue the savage thug mix, with the fake big sunglasses, the thug life hat, and the weed cigarette. Anywho, so it talks about that, and it also talks about another forgotten page toward the end when FDR was having problems. He was only U.S. president elected to 4 terms, and, well, technically 5, but he died like a year into his 5th. And honestly, he was such a popular Democrat and did so much good for the country that a good deal of even Republicans either respect a portion of them respect him. Others just think he's a vile communist who set America back and whose New Deal was Satanism and communism and bullshit like that. But you'll never have detractors. He's one of the best presidents of history, and to a certain extent, he's the reason why we have the amendment passing term limits. Because to a certain extent, Republicans were concerned that they'd never win in our election again because he was so popular. But anywho, toward the end of his presidency, it mentioned some comments he made that imply that he might have suffered mental decline as his body started failing. Like how he said that Germans marching in uniforms is the reason why they had Nazism in the first place, so uniforms should be banned in the new Germany. Another thing he mentioned is that maybe Germany should be broken up into small peasant lands, and the rest of the population should be allowed to starve. Luckily, he was convinced otherwise, but there's a lot of interesting chapters here. They also discussed how Truman, once he was aware of the atom bomb, and how that affected his decisions, how he swaggered in and told the Russians to go fuck themselves, how it changed the strategic calculus and how it set the world up for the Cold War. It also revealed how, to a certain extent, some of the people involved with the atom bomb didn't know what they were doing. Truman remarks in his journal that he deposited money in a secret account because some military official said, "We need money for secret purposes. We want you to set up this bank account." What he didn't know is that he was giving money directly to the Los Alamos project. Well, Los Alamos, New Mexico, and other test sites, the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb. So, and here's how it's different. It weaves narratives together, and it looks at unprecedented sources that have never been wheeled out before, examined by historians, or used to patch together a story. Stuff that has only recently been made available. Stuff that has only recently been declassified. Stuff like FDR's diary, Churchill's diary, Truman's diary, diary entries for Stalin. That's how it's different. And it's a great book. Again, with $6 at the same place. And even better, I didn't pay anything for it. Anywho, I highly recommend you buy this book. I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 stars. Buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, library, book sale, any place books are sold. Some last minute minute channel announcements and then the ending. I think I am going to do that documentary I filmed in Africa, because if you didn't know, I was on an African safari. So, if you don't know, Journeyman Pictures, the YouTube only documentary channel, which makes documentaries directly for YouTube with actual reporters and stuff, I'm going to be, to a certain extent, emulating them. I went out on a safari, filmed footage, and got good stuff. I would sell it to the National Geographic Channel, but I'm not sure if they would want it. And I figure if I do get a contract with Nat Geo, I can say this is a promotional item and blah blah blah. Anywho, so I got some extra footage, and I might have to do some editing to it because of sounds and such. Do a title card and a closing card, so on. Um, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to release it for you guys. All I need to do is edit, and I like diversifying this channel a bit. Sure, we do a lot of book reviews, but we also do um, political political videos on my opinions on who will win midterms in 2018. Uh, stuff like personal stuff like how I became an atheist. We also do things like movie and film theories, like why Avatar Aang is secretly evil, and several others. So I want to. This doesn't mean that I'm gonna commit less to doing book reviews. I will still do plenty of book reviews for you guys. It's just I also want to make other content, and of course, apocalypse stuff or shit hits the fan.